Morning, everybody. Welcome to AP Live, European History. My name is Todd Beach. I teach at Eastview High School in Apple Valley, Minnesota. That's a suburb of Minneapolis and St. Paul. It's a beautiful day today in Minneapolis. The sun is shining, and we're excited that you're here with us today. This is Katie.
Hi, good morning. I'm Katie Lancey. I teach at Coral Gables Senior High. It's in a suburb of Miami, Florida, and it's a beautiful day here today as well. We got a little cold front, so the weather is nice and mild. And happy Monday. We're excited to be with you today. So, Todd, you want to do our overview here?
Yeah, we'll get started. And I want to apologize to students that were watching on Friday because I was watching the playback and apparently my camera was on the entire time. And so we are not trying to frighten the children, and we'll make sure that that doesn't happen again. Okay, so here's our learning at a glance for this week. Today's the 27th, and we are going to have DBQ feedback today. Katie and I have gone through a lot of samples and have some things to share with you so we can all learn from that. And then our topic is the concept of Europe. I want you to take a look at Friday, May 1st. We have one more DBQ practice this week. And then take a look at May 4th. We'll give feedback from that DBQ. And then next week, it's like practice, feedback, and your exam is on the 13th. Those DBQ practices next week are going to be virtual proctoring. So I'll be doing it on Tuesday. Katie will be doing it on Thursday. We'll tell you more about what to expect on that time, but we'll get you ready for the 13th.
All right, so for today, again, as Todd said, if you want to look ahead to Friday, we have that DBQ practice. Today, we're going to go over the practice you did this weekend. All of the samples that we got as you're practicing this format that you're going to see on May 13th. And then we'll get into our lesson content at the end. And for today, our lesson content is going to cover the concert of Europe and conservatism, and then a brief overview of revolutions in the middle of the 19th century in 1848. And these are our learning objectives. Please feel free to stop the video and you can go over them at your leisure. And we're going to get into giving you feedback on the different parts of the document-based question you did over the weekend.
Okay, thanks, Katie. So we asked you to do the 5-document DBQ, time yourself. And if you are just joining us today and weren't here on Friday, you can go to Friday's video and you can see the DBQ. It's in the description underneath the video on the YouTube page, as well as the rubric. So we'll get into our first ones. And this is contextualization and thesis. So the A and the B categories. This is a response from Emily at Godwin High School in Virginia. And before we start unpacking this, we had well over 200 responses. I spent almost all day Saturday going through responses. We still have many that we did not get to. We'll try to get you feedback because everybody's obviously turning it in saying, how did I do? And we're doing our best. But here's the thing. If you really want to be a good learner with this, what you would have right now is your DBQ out in front of you. Take a look and compare your work versus the samples we're showing, okay? That'll give you some measure of where we're at. So again, here we go from Emily at Godwin High School in Virginia. This one is really, really well done. And we have contextualization, we have thesis. So I'll read it to you. The blue is the contextualization. The Industrial Revolution was a time period of vast economic and technological change, beginning in the late 1750s and early 1760s. The Industrial Revolution was when new technology was created that shaped the world. I really like what she does there because you have to kind of define it, right? You have to talk about what the Industrial Revolution was. The textile industry was first to take off after the invention of the spinning jenny, water frame, factory system. Katie always talks about, hey, we want to have some facts in that contextualization paragraph, and she definitely has that for us right there. After the textile industry began to explode with new invention and ideas, other industries saw the new technology and improvements like the railroad and coal industries. So this is really good fact-based context, bringing the reader into the argument. Then in the green, we got kind of a nice little transition sentence here. It's not necessary, but it's actually kind of part of the context. I just noticed it that she was shifting, and so I just wanted to highlight it. However, as more technology came out, the lives of the working class dramatically changed as they were often forced to go to cities for work in dangerous and filthy factories. So you can see she's kind of transitioning into her argument. And then here's the argument. The Industrial Revolution was not an improvement for the lives of the European workers because the workers were often living in crowded, unsanitary conditions. The hours and conditions which they worked were unsafe, and they had to fight for basic regulations and rights. So she's laid out 3 reasons. She's taken a position. It was not an improvement, and she's told us why. So excellent job, Emily. Godwin High School, Virginia. Next slide, please. This is one that does not earn the point for contextualization, but it is going to earn the point for thesis. So take a look at the blue. The Industrial Revolution was a time of invention and urbanization. People traveled from afar to the cities to pursue their manufacturing technology and find jobs to support their families. So it doesn't earn the point for contextualization. It's just far too thin. So the rubric's really clear. It says it has to be more than a passing phrase or reference. And it feels like this is really just a reference to what it was, not context, building up and bringing the reader into the historical period before the argument is made. So then here's the argument. Although the Industrial Revolution did increase technology and jobs, I like that nod to what it did. And then this response does take a position. It did not improve the lives of European workers. Instead, it created poor working conditions and an unsanitary lifestyle. However, later conditions did improve through avocation. I think the writer meant advocacy. That's why I put it in the bracket. So they earn the point for thesis, and we don't earn the point for context there. Next slide. This one is I selected because often they want to know, and teachers kind of want to know too, what's the minimal then? What is, I showed you Emily's from Godwin, that very first one, it was brilliant, right? Do they all need to be like that? No, but she writes like that, and well done for her. But here's kind of a minimal so that you have what does that threshold look like? And in the blue, the Industrial Revolution was a major change in the manufacturing processes in Europe and the United States. There were many machines invented, such as the spinning jenny steam engine and cotton gin, that resulted in higher production levels of products. These various machines resulted in a shift from producing products in the home to factories being born. Then they have a transition statement, and then we have our claim. The Industrial Revolution did not improve the lives of European workers, but instead caused poor work conditions and pollution. So you can see it's very minimal claim, but it does take a position. It does lay out a line of reasoning, and we have a minimal piece of context. So that should give you some ideas there for context and thesis.
Nice. All right, so, and if we move on from evidence, just a quick reminder that there are 3 potential points to get in evidence, and we're really looking for you to get the evidence of a document that is used to support an argument. Three points from documents. So this is Matthew from Brentwood High School in Tennessee. And this was the beginning of his paragraph. And I wanted to point out that he started with a nice topic sentence there. As more factories were built across Europe, the lives of workers were negatively impacted. So his argument here is that the conditions were not improved, right? Then he moves on in the blue to talking about the content of the document. One example is Robert Southey's account of the grimy city of Manchester in 1807 with narrow streets and blackened bricks from industrial smoke. And then in the green, takes that document and relates it back to the argument. These are negative impacts of rapid industrialization because people suffered from the lack of sanitation and basic cleanliness in their city. So this is a really nice job of someone who is using a document to support an argument. And we're really looking for students to get those full 3 points that come from documents, using 4 out of the 5 documents to support an argument. And then this next one is from Bethany at Eastlake High School in California. And the same thing, Bethany did a very nice job of starting with the topic sentence of the paragraph to lay out what the argument is going to be that the documents are going to support. And in the yellow, we have the Industrial Revolution worsened the lives of European workers because of exploitive conditions in the workplace. And then follows up that topic sentence with the actual content of the document. For example, in her published journal, Flora Tristan wrote about the fact that workers often spend 12 to 14 hours working every day in cramped spaces with poor ventilation, and how these conditions, and then she did at the end bring this back to that argument, affected the health of the workers negatively. So this was a really nice job. I like the attribution that was used at the beginning with the journal and the author. So that's a really nice job of evidence from the documents used to support an argument. If you do this with 2 documents, you're going to get 2 of the 3 evidence points that come from the documents. If you do it with 4, you'll get all 3 points. And then I wanted to show you here an example, and unfortunately, we did see a little bit of this weekend, of people who are just telling us laundry listings, so to speak, the documents. So the first thing is there's this topic sentence that's not related to any argument. A group of people known as the Romantics were very against being rational, and they emphasized emotion. So that is a definition of what Romantics were, but we're not looking at anything in regards to the prompt. And then followed up by, in document 1, in 1829, an English Romantic poet, Robert Southey, describes the conditions of the city of Manchester, calling the city destitute, but then never relates that to any kind of argument and goes right on to document 2 to tell me that in document 2, a Liberal member of Parliament responds to Southey, stating that his description is unrealistic. So these are, it's not that this is inaccurate discussion of the documents, but they're not being used in any way to support an argument because we don't know what the argument is that they're trying to make. So a topic sentence that was about the prompt could have helped here, or after using the document, relating that document back to what the argument is will help to make sure that you are supporting an argument while you're using these documents. All right, and then as we move on, remembering that there are 2 potential points for using evidence beyond the documents in your essay. So if you can see, this is Hannah at Schreiber High School in New York. And we'll start reading. Children and women specifically suffered many dangers in factories, and urban life expectancy dropped significantly. Many philosophies, such as utopian socialism and utilitarianism, grew out of the Industrial Revolution and in response to the unsafe and unethical working conditions for the urban working class. There was even, quote, poor relief, created in the form of workhouses idealized by Jeremy Bentham's idea of utilitarianism and made legal in 1834's Poor Laws. So this is something that Hannah was able to weave into the paragraph, and it is relevant to her argument. However, I wanted to point out that at the beginning, there was sort of some name dropping happening, and that really would have needed to be further developed to get the point. But at the end of the paragraph there, Hannah does a good job of giving us more than just name dropping. So I want you to remember that this needs to be more than just a reference or a phrase. And then another example is from Siddharth in Irvine High School in California. In addition, many people in the Industrial Revolution had poor working conditions. These conditions are evident in the many acts passed during the period. One such act was the Factory Act of 1833, which reduced the working hours for children to 8 hours per day, up from about 12 to 16 hours. Although this reduced the number of hours that children had to work, 8 hours of hard labor a day is a sign of capitalizing children and their innocent nature. So this was, again, part of an argument of the worsening conditions because of the Industrial Revolution. And Siddharth did a really nice job of bringing in a piece of outside evidence that wasn't found in the documents. So very nice job there too. All right, Todd.
Yeah, those were great samples. Thank you for that, Katie. Really clear. So I hope everybody's paying attention. Again, please have your DBQ out if you wrote one and make these comparisons as you're going through. We're going to talk about sourcing now. So this is a response from Arun at Guilderland High School in New York. And we'll unpack this for you. In the blue is the attribution. Robert Southey, an English Romantic poet, knew this best when he wrote his soliloquies on the progress and prospects of society in 1829 after visiting the English industrial city of Manchester. All that comes from the source line. Then Arun has put Doc 1. We like that you put the citation there. I personally prefer it at the end when you're done working with the entire document, but I just love that you did it anyway. So thank you for doing that. Readers will thank you as well. In the yellow is a description of what's in the contents of the document. In his colloquies on the progress and prospects of society, he explains the horror of city life, of workers, such as narrow streets, long working hours, and the lack of cleanliness and privacy. And in the purple, or that pinkish purple, it's kind of the student's explanation. He clearly shows that workers are having a hard time and faring worse than they were a few generations ago before industrialization. And then we get to the sourcing, it's point of view sourcing. In the green, Southey is a romantic poet and he's trying to uphold his beliefs. And then I just inserted, this is where we would use that phrase. This is important because Romanticism was a divergent movement from the rational Enlightenment thinking that led to industrialization, and he is trying to limit the impacts of the Enlightenment by supporting the workers. So there's a little bit of implicitness that is being applied there. It'd be even better if Arun would say something about workers as it relates directly and explicitly to Romanticism, but I think we've got enough there, especially in a timed exam, to earn the point for sourcing. So well done, Arun. Next one. Here's a response that does not earn the point for sourcing. Okay, we have attribution, the picture from the graphic magazine, and that's in the blue. Then in the yellow, we have a description of what is in the picture. Shows houses with smog all around them and water being flushed out of one of the houses. This helped to show the poor living conditions. The smog was from factories that were using machinery, and the water being flushed out was from a home, most likely was attached to their sewage system, which is flowing right into the water source. So we have a description of what the students saw in the graphic, in the visual. Then here's the sourcing attempt. The audience of this picture is anyone who read the graphic. Okay, so we've identified, we've not explained, but we've identified an audience. And in the purple is the attempt. It is important because this picture shows what kind of lives these people live in and what this new society is doing in the city. So it's an attempt at analysis, but it just doesn't go far enough. This response is saying that we have an audience, but it's not relating why the audience matters to this source. We kind of just have another description of what the picture does. And we have these very generic statements like these people and this society is doing in a city. So we have to it's got to be fleshed out a little bit more. Next one. This is from Gigi at Woodside High School in California. I really liked this one. I thought it was, wow, it was so well done. The blue is attribution. Thomas B. McCaughey also makes a case for the benefits of industrialization. Then we start with some sourcing. He was a liberal member of parliament, meaning he had considerable social prestige and wealth and followed capitalist laissez-faire ideologies. In his eyes, the danger of industrial society were no different than that of peasantry, as he wrote in response to Southey's writings. Doc 2. So good job of the citation. Then a description. He argued that the peasants' lives had never been graced with wealth and good fortune, meaning that new working conditions were just trade-offs for the increase in national wealth, which the manufacturing system has produced. Then we have further sourcing in the green. His claims come from a place of bias. As a liberal, he supported little economic intervention on the part of the government as capitalism in Britain functioned off of private business. So that's really well done. As a member of parliament, he saw the increase of wealth and industry of Britain, which he assumed would also benefit the workers. Instead, inflation meant that the workers still couldn't buy what they needed and that only the middle and upper classes receive actual wealth from manufacturing. His work is therefore an example of the class gap between the rich and poor and how those benefiting from a system will turn a blind eye to suffering. Really, really well fleshed out. That's just an exemplar sample. They don't have to be fleshed out as well as that, but we're certainly going to give props to you, Gigi, because that's pretty amazing.
Awesome.
And then here's one that does not earn the point for sourcing. We have attribution in her published journal, French socialist Flora Tristan. That's in the blue. Then we have a description in the yellow. Wrote about the hardships that workers faced in Manchester. She describes their lack of essentials such as food, fuel, and furniture in the unsafe working conditions. And then in the green, we have the sourcing attempt. As a socialist, Tristan would want the working class to be equal to the ruling class, and one can see this in her writing. So what we don't have is this is important because, right? We've identified that there is that Flora Tristan's a socialist, but we've really never explained how that relates to the position she's taking and what she's saying. That's what sourcing is about. Okay. And then we have just one example for complexity. This came from Emma at Rom High School in Connecticut. This is Emma's third body paragraph where she introduces a qualifying argument by considering an alternative view of the evidence. So in the blue is that introduction of the qualifying argument, although there were many poor working conditions, because that's a nod to the main argument she's been making. Some good did come out of the industrialization where European workers were concerned. Then she goes ahead and unpacks the next document. According to William Alexander Abram, by 1868, some of these rough conditions had improved thanks to the Hours of Labor and Factory Act. The longest a worker could work was now only 10 hours, and the wages of many workers had risen. There were reportedly also parks, baths, public libraries that allowed workers to relax, have fun during their time off. Abram also states that sickness and mortality had decreased significantly by this time. All of these conditions are clearly improvements from the rough conditions that workers had to face earlier, Doc 4. And then she also mentions Mulcahy's document in here. And then I'll go straight to the green because that's the sourcing. It's a great sourcing job too. It is important to note, however, that Mulcahy is a member of parliament, a governmental body. The government during this time was very supportive of industrial revolution due to the increase in profits it could make with the new technology. So it can be said that Mulcahy may be biased towards making it appear that the government has provided a service for the people by allowing industrialization and glossing over the less glorious parts of industrialization. So really really great job rather of the sourcing. And you can see as the third body paragraph, we're taking an alternative qualifying part of the argument that's going to certainly meet the complexity point.
That was really great, Todd. Great examples. And we did have a lot of great examples this weekend. So we're really impressed with you and continue to be. So as we get into our lesson today, we're going to start off with where we left off after we talked about Napoleon last week. And that is with the concert of Europe and Metternich and this ideology that's going to be pervasive in the 19th century, conservatism. So in the A paragraph, in the 19th century, conservatives developed this ideology in support of traditional political and religious authorities. They feared power in the hands of common people, and they believed that power should be in the hands of the upper classes. And so in B, in his portrait is there on the right, our poster child for conservatism is really that Austrian delegate to the Congress of Vienna that we talked about, Clemens von Metternich. So Metternich blames liberal middle-class revolutionaries for instigating the lower classes and believed that an authoritarian, aristocratic government was necessary to protect society from the baser elements of human nature. He had been very alarmed by both the French Revolution and Napoleon's rise to power. So during this time post-Napoleon, we're going to see conservatives reestablish control in many European states, and they're going to attempt to suppress movements for change. And in some areas, they're going to strengthen adherence to religious authorities. And Metternich is the brainchild of the concert system, the concert of Europe, or the Congress system. And that is really going to try to maintain the status quo. They're going to have collective action and adherence to conservatism. So all of this came out of the Congress of Vienna, which reestablishes conservative control generally. But of course, it doesn't resolve all of the differences, and leaders are going to be combating competing ideologies moving forward. And that's really what Todd's going to start talking about today, is that liberalism and nationalism are going to threaten this conservative order that they're trying to reestablish after 1815.
Thank you, Katie. So we'll get into the reforms and revolutions of France of 1848, and we're going to also, Katie will unpack what's going on in 1848 in Austria and Prussia. So again, we're back with France. So late 1840s, Europe entered a period of tense political and economic crisis that led to revolts and insurrections all across Europe. So historians, especially in the 19th century, historians talk about how we have dual revolutions taking place throughout the 19th century. We're moving from a political revolution. So think of a continuum, a line in your head of 1789 to 1914, political, right? So think what's changing politically during that long 19th century. We're moving or trying to move from absolute monarchy and subjugation to more representative government, right? And so what we are getting now are these tensions that are blossoming out. The other piece that's going on during this time is an economic revolution. We're moving from mercantilism to a more global marketplace, and we're moving to industrialization, and workers are demanding more. So this economic revolution is taking place at the same time. So I always tell my students, hey, have you ever seen Ghostbusters? Because what do they say in Ghostbusters? To never cross the streams, right? So what happens when these two revolutions, the political and the economic, cross the streams? That's when we get these tensions that bubble over, and what will eventually come out of it is a new ideology called socialism. So in France, for 18-year-old Louis Philippe's bourgeois monarchy, characterized by stubborn inaction and complacency. Complacency is a very good word there. They did nothing. They protected their status quo. It served the selfish interests of wealthy elites, failed to enact any social legislation, any electoral reform, keep things as they are. This is the conservatism that the elites and those in power want to keep. And now it's just going to come to a head, because what pushes it over the top are crop failures. Crop failures, 1846 and 47, unite a diverse group of opponents and eventually touched off, I'll get it, popular revolt in Paris, 1848. So it always seems to take some event, and when people can't eat, that seems to be enough to really motivate some revolt. So workers and students armed with guns will dig in behind makeshift fortresses, and they demand a new government. And indeed, when Louis Philippe will refuse to call on the army to put down the revolts, he will abdicate, and then revolutionaries will proclaim a provisional republic, and it's going to be led by a 10-man executive committee, draft a new constitution. So France is now on their second republic, 1848. First republic was 1792. So I always tell students, do you know which republic we're on? We're still on our first, so knock on wood. And then in E, they gave the right to vote to every adult male during the Second Republic. They freed all slaves in French colonies. They abolished the death penalty and guaranteed workplace reforms. So you think about how much political change France has experienced from 1789 to 1848. It's just constant. Next slide, please. And then, so we have this going on, but we still have unemployment. We still have food scarcities. So yay, we have a new Second Republic, but we still have problems that have to be solved. Louis Blanc will press for recognitions of socialist right to work, and he'll create these government-sponsored cooperative workshops. So this is this kind of thing where we sponsor public works to get people working and get the economy rolling. That's a very much a typical response when you have these kind of things. But the thing is, it's like too little too late. Moderate Republicans are willing to provide only temporary relief, and the resulting compromise to set up these national workshops, which are soon to become little more than a vast program of pick and shovel public works that satisfies no one, because more people are signing up for the workshops than they have jobs, right? And so you still have great unemployment. And indeed, as the workshops continue to fill and grow more radical, the fearful but powerful property classes in the assembly dissolve the national workshops. So they're fearing that all these workshops are just spreading discontent, and so they dissolve them. It gives the workers the choice of either joining the army or going to the workshops in the provinces or out into the outlying areas, not in Paris. So the result is very much a spontaneous and violent uprising. Barricades spring up in the narrow streets of Paris, and a class war begins. And we have the June days, 3 June days, street fighting, death, and of more than 10,000 people, they estimate. The Republican Army under General Cavaignac stood triumphant in a sea of working class blood and hatred, because the army is the army. The image on the right then is Cavaignac, and I kind of laugh at this image because here he is amongst the rubble and the smoke of the street fighting, and he is properly groomed and pressed, not a hair out of place. And then in F, in place of a generous democratic republic, the Constituent Assembly issues a constitution that features a strong executive. And guess what? Another Napoleon, Louis Napoleon, nephew of Napoleon Bonaparte, will win an election, and fulfilling the desire of the property classes for order at any cost, producing a semi-authoritarian regime. And yeah, history has somewhat repeated itself there.
Yep. All right, so as we move to Austria, Metternich, the person we just spoke about, has a famous quote that when France sneezes, all of Europe catches cold. And we can certainly apply that concept to 1848 with the revolutions that begin in France and move elsewhere. So we'll just quickly talk about Austria and then the Prussia and the German states. So Austria has a very widespread multi-ethnic empire that it has to try to struggle to maintain. There are nationalities such as Hungarians, Czechs, Serbs, and Poles. And this idea of self-rule, this wave of nationalism that is inspiring this idea to have self-rule, is going to be something that these governments are going to really have to work hard to put down. So on March 13th, 1848, after receiving news of what was going on in Paris, crowds of people, mostly students and members of liberal clubs, will start demonstrating in Vienna for basic freedoms and a liberalization of the regime. So all the things that Todd was just talking about, they're looking to have that also in Austria. They're inspired by some of the more liberal and social ideas promoted in France, like the establishment of workshops to guarantee more employment. Outside of Vienna, we're going to see revolution the same month in Hungary, with nationalistic Hungarians that are going to demand universal suffrage, full civil liberties, and national autonomy. And this is going to be followed by Czechs and then the Italians that want to be part of the Italian Confederation in northern Italy. So we have this sweeping wave of nationalism for home rule. And yet Austria's Habsburg monarchy, along with Russian assistance, will put down the revolt in Hungary, subdue the Czechs, and install a conservative monarchy under Francis Joseph, who will rule through 1916. And the image on the right is the surrendering of the Hungarian army. And then in Prussia, we have similar things that are going on. Again, both of them ending with the triumph of conservatism. We have, inspired by revolutionary uprising in France as well, demonstrators in Prussia and the German states demand civil liberties and reformed constitutions. So you should see that this is a concept that is crossing over between states, as France and other places are all looking for this embracing of liberal ideas that are happening. So, and this is of course the pushing against conservatism. So the King of Prussia, Frederick William IV, responds with force. He kills hundreds by the middle of March 1848, but he does promise to create a constitutional monarchy. And then the image that's on the right is the Frankfurt Assembly. So delegates, if you remember, we don't have German unification yet. We have these individual German states, and they are all sending delegates to Frankfurt. And here they're going to work towards creating a constitution and starting to think about that nod towards unification that we're not going to get done until 1871. But this process is slow going. The constitution that the National Assembly drafts does call for a federal union headed by a hereditary emperor with powers limited by a popularly elected legislature. So we're looking for these ideas that have been pervasive throughout decades here. Yet at this time in Berlin, the monarchy regains control. It crushes protesters and then refuses to accept the constitution that comes out of Frankfurt. So their liberal sort of agenda is put on hold, and they'll pick that back up at the end of the 19th century. But for now, what we're going to have is just a reestablishment of conservatism in Prussia.
Great, thank you, Katie. So as we were just talking about, the revolutions of 1848, you have to ask yourself what changed, right? There was revolution, there was an attempt, there was revolt, there was an attempt to change. But as Katie just unpacked, we still have monarchy in Prussia, we still have monarchy in Austria, and we have a strongman in France. So let's think about that as your takeaways for today, about explaining the political order, what maintained and what was challenged, explain which various groups reacted against the existing order. And then the causation and the contextualization was a big part of our lesson for today.
Great.
Okay, so for our exam practice, hey, this is a big week, everybody. On tomorrow, our exam practice is going to be on sourcing. Wednesday, our exam practice is going to be on outside evidence. We're kind of noticing that we really need a little bit of help with that. Thursday, our practice is going to be on context thesis. So we have a lot going on. I hope you're with us every day for practice this week. Here's our practice for today. We're going to look at two different arguments. So these are secondary sources. These are historians writing well after the fact. And what we want to do is, this is kind of like in the micro, because when you're doing a DBQ, you're looking at several sources and you're trying to figure out, okay, what's the main argument here? What's the main argument here? So let's just look at two, and I'm going to tell you there are opposing arguments here, and we'll kind of work on that skill for today. So your homework is in A, describe the author's main argument in source A, and number 2, describe the author's main argument in source B, and then 3, just evaluate the most significant difference between the two source claims. So you see number 3 is, it's kind of in the micro, right? It's that it's similar to our DBQ prompt, but we're just doing it with these two different arguments, the most significant difference between the two claims. So you write those up, submit your response to that email at apyourvirtuallearning@gmail.com. Please include your first name, school, and state or country, and we'll feature those tomorrow.
Awesome, Todd. So our shout outs for today, again, we're so excited that we keep getting so many responses. Our first one is Massaponax High School in Fredericksburg, Virginia. They're the Panthers, go Panthers. Fred J. Page High School in Franklin, Tennessee. They are the home of the Patriots. And Pulaski High School in Pulaski, Wisconsin. They are the Red Raiders. So thank you guys for continuing to watch. We really appreciate you and all your great feedback. And then the other thing we wanted to share with you today is the College Board has asked us just to introduce this to you, that they have partnered with quill.org to provide free online tools to improve writing skills. So if you're interested, students practice building sentences, and Quill provides feedback on how to revise and strengthen your grammar and syntax in preparation for AP exams. And it looks like, I guess it's a writing resource in general. So if you're interested, you can go to quill.org/AP to find out about that. All right.
Katie, I had a student send a joke in for me.
Oh no, is it a dad joke?
Well, maybe. Where did Napoleon keep his armies?
I don't know, Todd. Where did Napoleon keep his armies?
He kept them in his sleeveys, of course.
My goodness.
Oh, come on. It's so good.
Oh, guys, have a great day. Take care. Be well.
Thanks for watching, everybody.
Oh.